Welcome back to Newsfeed PM. Let's get into some business news now. When the late Tito Mboweni ascended to his governor role in the Reserve Bank in 1999, South Africa was still going through a fragile political transition that needed good economic policies to try lessen the gap between the rich and the poor. And one man who followed those developments closely is Professor Hirsch from the University of Cape Town. He joins us now to share his encounters with the man Tito Mboweni. Firstly, Professor, let me allow you an opportunity just to share a message after hearing the news of the passing of Tito Mboweni.
Well, I was very, very saddened. He wasn't, he's only 65. I'm a couple of years older. He was one of the, really fine people to come out of the liberation struggle, a person that I very much enjoyed working with, a strong man, a highly, highly intelligent man, and a completely honest and uncorruptible man. So I think we've lost somebody, really special.
In 1991, Mr. Mboweni, then a young ANC economist, came to rewrite the economic section of President Nelson Mandela's speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Can you just give us that anecdote that you shared in your book? Sure.
I'd actually met him a year before, in early ANC transition processes, but he traveled with Madiba to Davos. First time, remember, this is early 1991, less than a year after Madiba had left jail. He was getting a number of different people to write his speeches for him. And he had a speech which he was going to present to all the sort of titans of business in Switzerland, but from all over the world, who were very keen to hear him. Remember, he was accompanied by President de Klerk. And he'd got the section of his speech which basically said, we're going to nationalize all the big businesses in mines, banks, and so on. And Tito was traveling with him, received the speech, reviewed the speech, and in consultation with Madiba, obviously rewrote it to put it much softer, to basically say, where necessary, we will intervene in the economy. So the words to that effect. Was a very important intervention, and one which I think saved a lot of embarrassment. The funny thing is that some of the media got the speech before it was altered. So if I remember correctly, one or two of the South African Sunday papers published the speech in the form that it actually wasn't given. And then I'm not sure whether they ever corrected it. But it was a really, it was one of the typical initiatives that Tito, as a young man of 31, at that point, I think, had to take to keep the ship on the road, upright.
Now, Ellen, you wrote the book, Season of Hope, Economic Reform under Mandela and Mbeki. And of course, that gave you the opportunity to be very, very close to the economic cluster at the time. The amount of pressure that was on South Africa to prove itself in terms of governance, but also coming up with economic policies that not only deal with the social issues of the day, but also speak to what South Africa's place will be in the international stage. How did Tito Mboweni and his team do this?
Well, I think we have, I think he had an influence from very early on. Young man, studied in the UK, been in Lusaka, come back to South Africa. I met him, I think, in Lusaka, but later in Cape Town for the first time. He'd visited Cape Town, perhaps. He, apart from what he did there, he was involved in the formulation of the very early documents that the ANC put together. The ANC put together some joint documents with COSATU and others, and he was very influential and very thoughtful and careful about the way he put them together. Then there was a big ANC conference in 1992 where a document called Ready to Govern was prepared. And he was really quite influential in the wording of it. There was a big debate in the ANC over nationalization. That issue hadn't been resolved. Maybe it still hasn't been resolved. But the formulation that after Mandela's intervention they agreed to was proposed by Tito, if I remember correctly, the wording saying, where necessary, we will intervene in the economy, similar to the Davos intervention. Subsequent to that, he was the Minister of Labour. And I think this has been underplayed in some of the media. The role that he played as Minister of Labour in setting down the foundation of a progressive labour framework. The key labour laws were written and passed in his period. He made a commitment that while he was Minister of Labour, he would establish the framework for a just system of industrial relations, and he did very successfully. He also established NEDLAC. From that, he went to the central bank as the governor of the central bank. And remember, he was the governor of the central bank for most of the period that Trevor Manuel was also the Minister of Finance. And although they were both very smart, very strong men, and to some extent competitive with each other, their cooperation was absolutely critical to the development of South Africa, and it worked very well. They developed together an inflation targeting system for South Africa, which brought inflation under control and restored credibility to the rand, which hadn't had credibility for at least the last 20 years or so. We'd had 15% levels of inflation almost continuously from the 1970s to the late 1990s. So his impact was significant. He made the work of the bank much more transparent, and he served two, I think, very successful terms, very widely respected.
The job of governor is a very, very difficult one. A lot of things you need to balance there, but also thinking about the rest of the population. What kind of character was Tito Mboweni in trying to deal with those different challenges? Because you see the very serious work he's done, but when he has his sleeves up, was he a different kind of man?
Well, I had the good fortune of actually being with him on the commission of inquiry set up by the Speaker of the House of Parliament, Speaker of the Houses of Parliament, Baleke Kotsisile, and I think the other speaker at the time. We had a commission looking into legislation together. It was us and a number of other South Africans who had different experiences and different backgrounds. So, it was really enjoyable working with him. Going to meetings with ordinary people. We had consultations all over the country, and he was very keen to participate in those processes and listen to what the people had to say, as we all were. It was a very exciting process, and nice to be able to do that alongside him as well.
Well, Professor Ellen Hirsch, thank you so much for your time and just recounting the life and times of Tito Mboweni there.